Human rights has kind of become a buzzword and has come into our, the terminology of the business corporates maybe in last decade or so. It was always there. It has got deep-rooted history. If you Google and then you'll see the first records of human rights, or the Charter on Human Rights goes back to 6th century BC, when Cyrus, the first king of Persia, he actually conquered the city of Babylon. But what baffled everyone was that he next declared that everyone has a right to choose the religion. And this is documented by UN as the first Charter on Human Rights. The Magna Carta in 1215, adopted by King John of England, it laid the foundation of a modern democracy.
I think is one of the most important and one of the greatest moments in business and human rights over the last 3 or 4 decades, which actually involved intimately the businesses of India and the government of India. And that was, if you cast your mind back to the 90s, 2000s, sub-Saharan Africa was facing an HIV/AIDS crisis. 35 million people were facing death. Many of them died, simply because the pharmaceutical giants of the West were insisting that their intellectual patents were applied universally around the world. Indian government, alongside the Indian generic industry, alongside the Brazilians and the Chinese, at the World Trade Organization, with the support of Indian civil society, Brazilian civil society, and indeed many international NGOs, including organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières and Oxfam, all came together to say this was simply impossible to sustain. In fact, the pharmaceutical giants were so boneheaded, as the Financial Times called them, that they actually decided to take Nelson Mandela to court in South Africa to insist that their universal patents were applied. But because of the pressure that was put on, within the space of about 18 months, that global negotiating power of the BRICS, alongside the willingness of the generics industry to provide antiretrovirals, that price was reduced from $10,000 per person per year to $98 per person per year, which essentially meant those 35 million people, those that were left, 15 million had already died, but the other section were able to take antiretrovirals and therefore survive through that epidemic. I think that illustrates the power of business and human rights together, and the importance of this topic in the world. Because business can be involved in intense abuse in both their operations and in their supply chains. But business equally can be one of the most important, global markets generally, can be some of the most important ways in which human rights are realized, and the emancipatory effect of business can be realized as well.
I was told by employees, the majority of employees, men and women, unionized and non-unionized, that the best thing we could do with HIV/AIDS infected people was to leave them at home, pay their salary, and not let them come to work. And this had overwhelming support. So when you're talking to 99% and that is the attitude, how do you affect change? How do you bring about a humane solution where that person is allowed to come to work and is allowed to be there? And as things usually happen in India, I think it is a question again of the top management. When there were cases where senior executives were infected with this virus, it made a difference. When the children of very senior officials faced the same dilemma, then a breaking down of the barriers. Is it because the person is gay? Is it because the person has used intravenous drugs? And even if they had, will you not treat somebody with a chemical dependency problem? So I think that for us working at that time, and those of us who will continue working with industry, the issue is that we have to champion these. Beyond looking, just saying there is no business case for HIV/AIDS or something that we could have said in that time. And we should be listening very carefully to the communities that inform us and save our lives frequently, rather than looking at them as beneficiaries of charity or some compliance-based CSR.